In 2012, a young man named Chris lay dying. Chris was a high school senior, a redhead with a big smile and a big heart, and he was the victim of a hit and run. His mother, Christine, never left his side. For 8 days, she stayed with him, hoping and praying for a miracle as the doctors told her that there was no brain activity, that there was no hope for Chris, that he would die. And it took Christine 8 days to be able to let go of her son, to let go of all the hopes and the dreams that she had for him. Now, many of us have been in that same place. We have had to let go of people we love. We've had to let go of dreams that we had, marriages we had, hopes for the future that we had. And that place of letting go is where Mary and Martha are this morning in our reading. They have been hoping that Jesus would come in time to heal Lazarus, and he did not. And their brother died. Now, we are in John's Gospel again today, and you already know by heart what I'm going to say, that John's Gospel is deep. It has layers of meaning, and we need to read the story looking to see what meaning is there for us to uncover. And you'll also know from last week that the word miracle does not appear in John's Gospel. Jesus performs no miracles, but he does perform signs, and those signs point at something greater. And in this case, the signs point at resurrection, at new life, and at Jesus' own resurrection to come. Now, there's one other concept about John's Gospel that I want us to understand before we look at this reading. And that is, scholars say that John's Gospel has a high Christology, which simply means that Jesus is portrayed as more divine and less human. The Jesus of John's Gospel is calm, collected, completely in control. He knows exactly what is going to happen, and he generally doesn't lose his cool. He understands the bigger picture. And so the Jesus in John's Gospel does not even suffer in the Garden of Gethsemane. He does not ask God to take this cup from him. He knows he's going to die on the cross. And he says, nobody is going to take my life from me. I will lay it down. And that is what he does. He's on the cross. And he says, it is finished. He lets go of his spirit and he dies. All on his terms. So now that we have that understanding of John's Gospel in mind, let's look at this story and see what Jesus does. Now, Lazarus is sick. Mary and Martha send a message to Jesus. They are probably frantic. And remember, there's no cell phones, no texting, no GPS. Who knows where Jesus is, right? He's there somewhere, and they probably send a messenger on foot who has a verbal message for Jesus. He gets to Jesus, gives the message, and Jesus says, well, this won't end in death. And he just kind of dawdles with the disciples for a couple of days. And this is our first problem with this text. When we call for help, when we pray to God for help, we want God to be there and to respond to our calls. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus knows the end of the story, right? Jesus knows that Lazarus is going to be raised from the dead, but Mary and Martha do not know that. And he doesn't seem to realize that they are going to be in pain and grief. Now, there are a couple ways to rationalize why Jesus would wait 2 days. And the one that I always used to hear when I went to an evangelical church was, it was difficult to know when somebody had actually died. Sometimes they appeared to be dead, but they weren't. And so there was something called a wake. It lasted 3 days where people gathered around the person and waited to see if they would wake up. After 3 days, if they didn't, there would be telltale signs that a person had passed. And Jesus is just waiting for that period of time to expire before he goes to raise Lazarus from the dead. He doesn't want this to be a healing. He wants it to be a resurrection. Now, I can understand that, but what I can't understand is, why didn't he at least send a message to Mary and Martha? Why didn't he go there to comfort them? If you get a call from a family member that somebody is hurt or sick or dying, don't you go? Don't you call? Don't you support your community? And these are people Jesus loves. John just read that in the reading for us. This is Jesus' found family, Mary and Martha and Lazarus, people he loves, and yet he does not go to them. Now, there's one other way that I've heard somebody rationalize the 2 days. I'm not sure this works either. But here we look at the message. They send a message to Jesus. It takes about a day, give or take, for the messenger to get to Jesus. Jesus waits the 2 days, and then on the 4th day, Jesus goes, and how long's Lazarus been dead? 4 days. Lazarus died the moment the message is dispatched, and Jesus knows this. Still does not excuse Jesus' behavior. So I've been wondering about this. Why would Jesus not go to Mary and Martha immediately? And I have to ask if it's because he is giving them enough time to fully let go. Not just let go of Lazarus, but let go of the hope that Jesus is going to fix this for them. To be in that space where they have just given up everything. Now, I don't know for sure, but as we go through the rest of this story, maybe that idea will make a little more sense. That there's something about letting go that Jesus needs to have accomplished before this resurrection can take place. So on this 4th day, Jesus goes to Bethany, and while he is still outside, he's coming into the village, but he's not at the house, Martha comes to meet him. She's weeping and grieving, and she says, "Lord, if you had been here, this would not have happened." She leaves, and Mary comes with a whole entourage of grieving community members, and she says the exact same sentence. "If you had been here, this would not have happened." And then the text says that Jesus was disturbed in his spirit. Now, I don't know what that means, so I looked up the Greek. And it says Jesus snorted in his spirit. That's what it says. He snorted in his spirit. Now, what in the world does that mean? Now, a few days ago, I remember I was sleeping soundly and my nose and mouth made a funny noise like, and I woke up, startled. Now, I know none of you or your bodies make funny noises when you're sleeping, but mine did. And that's the closest I can get to what is happening to Jesus here. He snorts in his spirit. This is something unexpected for this one who is more divine than human. And I think he is hearing the words that these women said to him. He's understanding that they are speaking the truth. They are suffering because of him. And I think he is taken aback by the grief that the whole community has. And I think he may also be thinking about his own letting go. A few days or weeks from that day, when he is on the cross, and he has to say, "It is finished," and release, let go of his own spirit. And maybe that's why when he is on the cross, he says to his mother, "This disciple will be your son, and this will be your mother." Because he understands the pain now of letting go, of completely giving up on everything, on laying the thing we love in the tomb, whether it's a marriage or a person or a career or anything else. And it takes time to really let go. Now, I know there's this cliche that says, let go and let God. Please don't say that. Because if you have ever truly let go, you know how hard it is. And you know how much it hurts. And so please don't use those kinds of easy sayings with people, because it is offensive to those who have truly let something go. So Jesus snorts in his spirit and realizes the depth of the pain of letting go. And then he goes to the tomb. And that same community that surrounded Mary and Martha, now they have been grieving with them. Now they are called into action to move the stone. And when Lazarus comes out of the tomb, it's the community who unbinds Lazarus. It's not Mary and Martha. It's the community that does that work. That is the work that Christine, the mother of that 19-year-old child who died, that's the work she does today. When she was in the hospital with Chris for those 8 days, she learned something new about her son, and she remembered something about him. She remembered that when he got his driver's license, he was very excited about being an organ donor. And she learned that just days before the accident, Chris had gone to their pastor and reaffirmed his faith and said that he was choosing to follow the teaching of Jesus and to serve others. And knowing those two things about Chris allowed Christine to talk to a person from a group called LifeLink about possibly giving parts of Chris's body so that others can live. And so on that 8th day, when Christine was holding on to her son's hand, she let him go at the door to the operating room. Once the equipment was disconnected, Chris would die. But if they wanted to share parts of him to bring life to other people, he would go into the operating room, and that is where she would say goodbye and fully let go. And because of Chris, 4 people lived that day. One of them was a young father. He had a new baby girl. He wanted to be there to raise her, and he needed a heart. And he received Chris's big heart. And he even allowed Christine and other family members to listen to Chris's heart beating in his chest. And they understood that life can come from death. So Christine now works for LifeLink. She goes to hospitals and she grieves with families who are grieving. She knows that road so well. And then she rolls away the stone to allow them to have some hope. And she unbinds their dead so that life can come from this place of death. It's an incredible story in our Bible today with so many different ways to see it. But I don't want us to think just about people and their death. I want you to think about other things in your life. In my own story, I was called to be a minister in my 30s. Couldn't do it because I was in an evangelical church and it wasn't allowed. But eventually, many years went by and I went to seminary and I got my credentials and all those things, and I was working in a church for 12 years, pastoring at the end of that time. And I knew that God was calling me out of that church. So I left that church fully expecting God's just going to give me a new church and everything's going to be great. And that didn't happen. I was searching for a church. There's a process called search and call. I was searching for a church that was just right, and none of them were. I disappointed 2 churches because I thought that I could make it work. It wasn't working. I had no peace. And so I'm walking one day and praying, as I did every day at that time. Walked and prayed, and I was walking in a cemetery. Now, I have found that cemeteries have like a thin heaven. There's so many hopes and dreams buried in a cemetery. There's been so many tears cried and prayers prayed that it feels like we are more closely connected with the divine. So I am praying, and as I pray, I pick up a stone, and that stone is my ministry. It's my calling. And I'm carrying that stone, and I'm saying to God, what do you want me to do? Everywhere I turn, the doors are closed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I left my church, and you haven't given me anything. And as I walked and prayed, I realized exactly what God was asking me to do. God was asking me to lay that ministry down, to bury it, And just as this comes to me, I turn the corner and there's a beautiful wooded area and there is a freshly dug grave where there had not been one the day before. A mound of earth over a woman's body and one of those metal markers that said her name was Doshi. And I knew that I needed to bury my ministry, my life's work. I had gone to school for years and years. I had studied the Bible my whole adult life and even my childhood. And I knew I had to bury my calling in this grave. And so I talked to Doshi for a minute. And I said, Doshi, I hope you don't mind, but I've got to bury this, and I'm going to bury it in your grave. She did not answer. But I did that. I dug into the ground, and I buried my ministry, and I covered it over, and I was shattered. I had nothing. This was my whole life. And I walked away. For 2 years, I walked away. I tried to attend church here and there, and it just felt terrible to me. I worked as a social worker. I did anything I could do to help people without church, without call, without pastoring. And then after 2 years of completely letting this go, God called me again. And I snorted in my spirit. You want me to do what? After we just went through all that back there? And I wonder if Lazarus didn't do the same thing. He's just chilling out with the ancestors. And he hears Jesus calling him, and he's got to say, you want me to do what? You want me to come back to a life that's full of pain and suffering, and I got to die again? Did you ever think about that? Once the shock of it wears off, then the joy comes. And this time, when I began to look for a church, I had zero expectations, which was good for St. John's, because they never made my list the first time around. I think y'all were there on that list, and I thought, Jackson, nah, I'm not going to look at that one. This time, I had no expectations. This was God's deal, not mine. And I'm so glad it worked out the way that it did. But it's in that letting go. It hurts. It's painful. It's terrible. Christine had to let go, not just of her son, but of all the hopes and dreams she had for him and for his life. He was going to be in the Marine Corps when he graduated. And she had to let that all go. Mary and Martha had to let go of Lazarus completely and let go even of their hope that Jesus was going to show up in time to save the day, because he didn't. He let them wait. And Jesus realizes the pain of letting go. And so today I want to leave you with a question about where you are in this story. Because today maybe there is something that you have been carrying for a long, long time. And God is saying, are you ready to let that go? To fully let it go. Not just let it go on Sunday and then pick it back up again on Monday. Because that's not truly letting it go. And if you don't, that means you are one of the community, and it is your job to hold space with the people who are grieving. It's your job to roll away the stone and show some possibilities. It's your job to unbind the dead and let life come. And I don't know how that will look for you, but I do know that all of us fit in this story someplace. So where do you fit?